So, normally when I begin these classes, I like to begin with an assignment that explores political topics. And the more I think about this, and the more I roll this around in the old noggin, the more terrified I am of doing that. And this is the first time in forever that I've just straight up looked at an old assignment that I used to do, and I just look at it and I'm like, that might not be a very good idea. Mainly because I've never seen so many fires burning at the same time. And I'm just worried, especially for the online environment where I'm not in the room to mitigate political discourse. Because normally I'm pretty good when people get carried away with a concept, or if people, start to go back and forth, I can come in and I can diffuse that situation. I'm really good at that. But I'm not 100% certain I'm going to be able to do that in the online environment. That's presenting one heck of a challenge. So I've been milling around in my old noggin on how we could do something similar to this assignment and not potentially light all of ourselves on fire. And so I started thinking about this in terms of, when we talk about politics, what is it we're really talking about? We're talking about issues, right? We're talking about things that are important to us as a community, and us as Americans, us as Georgians, us as natives of whatever city we live in right now. So when I started thinking about it along those lines, I think it gets a little bit more palatable. So I think one of the things that we'll do to begin this discussion, and the good news is we got 15 weeks to play around with all these ideas, right? So what I think might be a good way to begin this discussion would be to start with a list of what you think the most important issues are that we face as why am I blanking on these words so much? As citizens, right? As citizens as people who live in the city, as people who live in the country, as people who live in Georgia. These are all, things that I think that we can at least sort of have some common ground on as we start talking about civic topics instead of political civic topics. So I'm going to go first. I'm going to list a few of them that I think are interesting. And as I list out these particular issues, I'll try to think about what some potential layers of complexity I can, drape over it. The first one that comes to mind for me is, of course, COVID-19. Now, the last time I did an assignment like this, we went full political discourse, and COVID-19 was the thing that got everybody writing. It wasn't necessarily the best writing I'd ever seen, because that's not the problem on behalf of the students either. At that point in time, we didn't know very much about it. And so students were going and researching all this stuff and trying to get all this data, but the data was all completely 100% inconclusive. So one of the things that I introduced into that discussion was I had to be kind of easy on them, because nobody had any real idea what we were going to be facing at the time. And for most of the students, they assumed that this thing was going to blow over relatively quickly. And now here we are. So COVID-19, and the big argument that's been going on the last few weeks, it's kind of fizzled down a little bit right now, is, should students be returning to school right now? And the ones that I'm looking at more than anyone else is the ones in elementary school, middle school. Not so much the high school students, although their middle and high school students are apparently the ones who are the most likely to spread the dadgum thing, right? So why on earth are we sending children back to school right now? Now, there are some, and I'm going to try to avoid using party names, because one of the points I'm going to try to make as I talk about politics in this class, it doesn't necessarily fall between Republican and Democrat. It falls on where people react to certain issues. So there are some people who feel children shouldn't be going back to school right now at all. It's way too dangerous, not just for the kids, although there is definitely some danger for the kids and for the students, but it's also a danger to their families and to the relatives who may come into contact with them later. Just because just because younger students don't report, getting sick as often with corona, doesn't necessarily mean that they don't have it and that they can't spread it, right? So on that note, what is the argument for putting kids back into schools? And this is where I sit back and I find it to be very interesting. And as I'm exploring these political ideas, these civic ideas, I'm going to kind of both sides it a bit because I'm trying to be fair to the people who are participating in this conversation. So hear me out. If there's a lot of potential bad in the situation with sending kids back to school, then why on earth are we going ahead and doing it? I think one of the big reasons is that our schools are essential for the engine of the economy to work, right? Without children being in schools, without students being in schools, their parents' hands are tied up and they can't work as easily. And that causes a drag on the economy. Now, as much as people want to sit back and be like, you mean we're potentially sacrificing lives for the economy? The economy actually is kind of important too. And I could get a lot of pie on my face for saying this, pardon me. Sometimes I like to change it up. I need some, and that's chapstick, by the way. The economy is actually really important because if the economy doesn't jumpstart in the right way, you have potential, you could have people potentially starving to death if they don't have money to feed themselves and their families. It's a weird balancing act, right? So in a lot of ways, when we encounter this problem, there is no right answer. That answer is very much covered in a layer of murk. And that's kind of one of the things that you'll see when we start talking about political issues. So coronavirus is a big current political / civic topic. What I want us to do is we're going to start kind of listing these topics out and trying to get a better understanding of what these topics actually entail. So let's think of another one. Another tried and true one that never fails to generate discussion is, of course, gun control. Now, gun control, as far as a political issue, falls along the line of the wording of the Second Amendment. Why, if we have the right to bear arms, according to the Second Amendment, why is there a push in this country at all for the regulation of firearms? Well, we have a lot of problems in this country regarding firearms usage. There are mass shootings. There's violence. The statistic, and I need to make sure I cite these statistics, because if I'm not citing these statistics, then I've got a huge, serious problem myself. But there's a lot of statistics that say that if you own a firearm for the purpose of self-defense, you are far likelier to use that gun on yourself than you are on any intruder, right? So I don't think that there's very many people saying, oh, no one should be allowed to have guns. But there is a conversation between who should be allowed to own what type of gun and what are the hurdles that we put in place to keep certain people from owning a gun. And I like to offer myself up as a bit of an example of this too, because it's not fair for me to sit here and be like, those people shouldn't have it. That person is wrong, blah, blah, blah. But think about this. I have no problem sharing with my classes, my students, that I have been diagnosed with major clinical depression, right? It's cost me some real problems in the past. I'm on medication for it. Don't worry too much about me. Dim's good pills. But in any case, I'm doing fine. But me personally, I feel it should not be easy for me to own a firearm. If anything, I feel like that there's a real good argument to say that I shouldn't be allowed to own a firearm. Not because I'm a danger to anyone else, but from a pure statistic standpoint, from a sheer likelihood standpoint, if there's a firearm in my house, I'm much more likely to use it on myself for the sheer fact that I have a pre-existing psychological condition, right? So that's my example. Now, I'm going to come up with a few more, and I'll tell you what I want you to do for this first assignment this week. So I've done gun control. And listen, one of the things that I say to my students, if I ever say anything in these videos that make you upset, like, I don't agree with Mr. Bailey, I think he's wrong, write about it. That's a really, really fast way to get points from me. is if you challenge me on something I say. I like that. So don't feel that disagreeing with me is going to be any problem for you. That's something that I like. I'd rather you argue with me than with anyone else. I mean, we might have some arguing. I'm going to try to find a way to frame this so that you guys don't have to argue with each other, because, it's not that I'm afraid of debate. I kind of just sort of feel like we have enough of that in our life right now. So I want to try to explore this in a way that's really positive. Let's keep going with the list. So I've done coronavirus. I've done gun control. What's another good one? I don't want to do abortion. So what I'm going to do instead, I'm going to tie in with coronavirus again. And it's not that abortion is a bad topic. It's just, I don't want to do it right now. If you really want to write about abortion, then have at it. I just don't feel like it. So a third one, kind of connecting with the coronavirus thing. What about the nature of healthcare in general? And this is kind of an interesting question. We in America value our individual freedoms. We value our ability to choose our healthcare providers and the type of healthcare that we will receive. When we hear the idea of universal access to healthcare, what most Americans hear in that regard is, you want to take away my choice to pick the doctor that I want and the coverage that I like, right? But the coronavirus has complicated that a bit, at least in my opinion. With coronavirus raging out of control, all of a sudden, another person's choice to not get health care for themselves means that they have become a danger to everyone around them. And that's not to blame them, because there's a lot of people out there who can't afford health care. I don't know what I would do if I didn't have my job right now. So it's not in any way an attack at people who don't have health insurance. But the condition of pricing health insurance in a way that so many people struggle to afford it means that there are people out there who will get the disease and can't afford to be tested, won't know they have it. And there are people who can't be treated, and they're going to spread it, mainly because they don't even know that they have it. Coronavirus has injected a very strange point into that classic debate here in America about universal guaranteed healthcare access versus my right to individual choice. Because it used to be, if I chose to not get healthcare for myself, the only person I was really hurting was me. But now I could potentially hurt a lot of other people, right? So that's interesting too. Universal healthcare, the status of that debate. I'm trying to think of one more. It's funny because normally teaching online with a video camera on YouTube is really difficult because I don't have people to bounce ideas off of, which frankly drives me a little bit crazy, because a lot of times these lectures get much more robust because I can play off of what you guys say and we can build a conversation. That's like one of the main driving joys of my teaching, is to take an idea and shape it and mold it. It's like one of the things that I absolutely love. And that's why for me, when I teach with the online camera, I'm not reading off of a script, right? I want you to feel like you're getting a lecture that is based like for you. I'm making this up as I go. I'm figuring things out as I go. I want you to feel like you're being taught. So anyway, our last issue that I want to explore here now, and I'm like literally listing it off. This is a cliche one, but we're going to do it. Environmentalism. Environmentalism versus the need of industry. And this is something that's caused me to lose a lot of sleep over the years. My father was a Boilermaker. He worked at nuclear power plants. He worked at factories. He built a shrimp boat. And he was a real working man with his hands, right? He built and he made. And one of the big things that always bothered him, he was never one who was sympathetic to environmentalism. For him, the environment is not as important as his ability to feed his family, right? Jobs were one of the single most important things to him in a political conversation. And that's something that, as much as I want to be a little like, I'm all green and crunchy, I still have Dad's voice in my head talking about, but what about people's jobs? What about people's ability to put food on the table? For him, that was the most important thing. For him, when the government comes in with a lot of regulations, and they shut places down and they have all this stuff to try to protect the environment, it makes it harder for people to go out and earn their livelihood. And again, I'm really not much of a political centrist. I know what party I vote for. I don't want to tell you yet, just because I'm going to keep my secrets, at least for right now. But whenever I talk with my students about political issues, I go straight to the center, because for me, I don't necessarily want you guys digging in on your own opinion. You can have your opinion, but I would like for you to take some time to look at it from the perspective of the other side as well. And you'll notice I went dead to the center of both of them. I gave each perspective its own credence, its own weight. So it's like, when it came to children going back to schools, the engine of the economy to me is actually pretty important as well. There's a lot of my liberal friends who would be like, "Oh, David, that's terrible." And I'm like, well, it is what it is. So I've given you a cross section of some important issues facing us today. And these aren't just national issues. These are issues that face our community, that face our cities, our state, and our country. You could go global even if you wanted to. For now, as we prepare to do some real straight up political writing, that was cool. I want you guys to just go to the political writing discussion forum. And I want you to share with me, not your opinions, but some views and some suggestions as to what are difficult topics. What are some things that generate a lot of debate right now? What is dividing us, and what is, and take that kind of like, just identify the problem. There's all sorts of interesting directions that you can go in. If you just go to CNN or Fox News, I'm sure a billion things are going to pop out for you all over the place. You don't have to reply to anyone yet. Just go and write me a quick paragraph telling me about those issues that you see facing us. Just tell me about the problems. I think that'll be enough for this Tuesday. And I'll post a new video next time on Thursday. I'm going to give you some more very specific ideas of what I want you to write and how I want you to write it. And we'll have a tentative due date for the first paper. All right. It's going to still be a little while, so don't think it's sneaking up on you. We're in the pre-writing phase. We're going to go back and kind of assemble it from these little small writing assignments I'm giving you now. So it's storming outside. I feel like I want to meditate in my office for a while as nature rages around me. And thank you very much for listening to me. I hope that my YouTube lectures still continue to maintain this level of energy. It's exhausting though. I had a lot of chili. It was delicious. My wife made it for me. I'm gonna end the video now.